Jessica is living the dream: a beautiful house, two healthy children, and a husband who's successful, charming, and handsome. Her son, Matt, a teenager on the verge of adulthood, is a straight-A student and a promising athlete. Her daughter, Lily, is a bubbly 10-year-old, full of life and energy. Peter Palmer, her husband, is always off to work in a crisp suit, the picture of a thriving, successful lawyer. Their lives seem perfect, punctuated by dinners with other well-to-do families, wine nights with other mothers, and weekends spent lounging by the pool. But beneath Jessica's polished exterior lies a growing void. She spends hours tending to the house, arranging flowers, decorating and redecorating the living room. But nothing feels right. She scrolls through Instagram for hours, comparing herself to the other wives and mothers whose lives seem even more perfect than hers. Peter is rarely home. His work, once a necessary sacrifice to provide for the family, has now become an escape for him. The job, the business trips, and the constant phone calls serve as a barrier between them. Jessica, once vibrant and full of dreams, now feels like she is playing a role in a play that no longer excites her. Her marriage has become stagnant. Conversations with Peter are surface level at best, reduced to logistics about the kids, the house, and his next business trip. Intimacy, once a cornerstone of their marriage, has dwindled to occasional kisses and brief hugs. In quiet moments, when the kids are at school and Peter is away, Jessica sits on the edge of her bed, staring out at the quiet neighborhood, wondering if this is all there is. She sometimes fantasizes about running away, packing up a suitcase, and driving off to somewhere unknown where she could be free of expectations and responsibilities. But the thought never lingers long. She loves her children too much to leave, and she's not even sure where she would go. So she stays, trapped in the suffocating perfection of her suburban life. Her days stretch out like an endless loop, dropping the kids off at school, grocery shopping, arranging charity events, chatting with neighbors, and pretending everything is fine. Every day, the loneliness deepens, a silent ache that she can't quite put into words, even if she wanted to. The arrival of William Palmer, Peter's son from his previous marriage, disrupts Jessica's carefully maintained world. William had been raised by his mother in Los Angeles, and though he spent holidays and occasional weekends with Peter, Jessica never saw much of him. He's 24 now, a confident, charismatic young man. When he steps into their home, the air shifts. William is a striking figure, tall, with tousled dark hair, and an easy smile that could charm anyone. His presence is magnetic, and Jessica can't help but notice the way he carries himself, exuding a confidence she hasn't seen in anyone in a long time. Jessica remembers the awkwardness of William's teenage years, how he had once been shy and quiet, but time has transformed him. He speaks with assurance, his voice warm and resonant, and he possesses a maturity beyond his years. As he enters their home, Jessica feels a strange flutter in her chest, something she hasn't felt in a long time, a spark. It is nothing more than a flicker of awareness at first, something easily dismissed as the harmless admiration of someone younger and more full of life than herself. Peter is delighted to have his son back, albeit temporarily. William is between jobs and has decided to stay with them for a few weeks while he sorts things out. The family dinners are livelier with him around. William is full of stories about his travels, his job-hunting adventures, and the excitement of life in the city. He has a way of making even the most mundane details sound exciting. His energy is infectious, and even Matt, who usually keeps to himself, seems captivated by his older half-brother. But for Jessica, William represents something more. His arrival shakes her out of the numb routine she has settled into. She finds herself looking forward to dinner conversations, hanging on to every word he says. The house, once quiet and filled with her loneliness, now seems brighter, livelier. There's an unspoken connection between them, something that simmers beneath the surface, though neither of them acknowledges it yet. The first time Jessica truly realizes the shift in her feelings is over breakfast. It's a Saturday morning, and Peter is, unsurprisingly, away on a business trip. The children are still asleep, leaving Jessica and William alone in the kitchen. It's a simple moment. Jessica preparing coffee, William leaning casually against the counter. But there's a charged tension in the air. They chat about trivial things at first. The weather, his plans for the weekend, a funny story from the news. But then William mentions something about his life in LA, about a relationship that didn't work out, and the conversation turns deeper. They talk about relationships, about love and loss, about dreams unfulfilled. Jessica finds herself opening up to him in ways she hasn't with anyone in years, not even Peter. As they sit at the breakfast table, sunlight streaming in through the large kitchen windows, Jessica feels an undeniable pull towards him. His eyes linger on hers just a little too long, his smile a little too knowing. There's a moment, brief but intense, where their gazes lock, and in that instant, something passes between them, an unspoken recognition of the attraction neither can deny. Later, by the pool, Jessica and William share more of these moments. She watches him swim, his strong body cutting through the water with ease. He lounges on the poolside, water glistening on his skin, and Jessica catches herself staring. It's wrong. She knows it. He's her stepson, barely a man. But there's something intoxicating about the way he looks at her, as if he sees the parts of her that have been invisible for so long. The tension grows in small, almost imperceptible ways. A lingering touch as he hands her a drink, a shared smile over dinner, a glance that lasts a second too long. Neither of them acknowledges it, but they both feel it. The attraction is there, simmering just beneath the surface, growing stronger with each passing day. One evening, when Peter's out of town once again and the children are asleep, Jessica and William find themselves alone by the pool. The night is warm, the stars bright above them, the air filled with the scent of blooming flowers. They sit in silence for a while, sipping their drinks, the only sound the gentle splash of water in the pool. It starts with a conversation, one that seems innocent at first. They talk about life, about choices, about the roads not taken. William opens up to Jessica in ways he hasn't before, and she finds herself drawn to his vulnerability. He talks about the pressure of living up to his father's expectations, the weight of being Peter's son, and the uncertainty of his future. Jessica listens, her heart aching for him. Then, as the conversation lulls, William turns to her, his eyes searching hers. There's a moment of hesitation, a moment where they could pull back, but neither of them does. Instead, they move closer, their breaths mingling in the warm night air. And then in one swift, forbidden moment, their lips meet. The kiss is electric, filled with all the pent-up desire they've been holding back. It's a moment of pure passion, of release, and once it starts, they can't stop. They spend the night in each other's arms, their affair ignited in the quiet of the suburban night, their secret sealed by the walls of the house that now feels like a cage. The affair becomes their addiction. They steal moments whenever they can, a glance across the table, a touch of the hand when no one's looking, secret meetings in the middle of the night. They know it's wrong. They know the consequences could be devastating, but they can't stop. For Jessica, it's the first time in years she has felt truly alive. For William, it's a forbidden thrill, a way to break free from the expectations that have weighed him down his whole life. But as the affair deepens, so does the danger. The weight of their secret begins to press down on them, and they both know it's only a matter of time before it all unravels. The days following the affair feel surreal for Jessica. What started as an electrifying moment of passion is now a festering secret that grows heavier with each passing day. In the quiet moments of her life, when she's picking up her kids from school, when she's folding laundry, or even when she's having mundane conversations with her friends at the local coffee shop. Her mind drifts back to William, but with that attraction comes guilt that gnaws at her. The consequences of her actions hover over her like a storm cloud, constantly threatening to burst. The perfect suburban life that she had built so meticulously now feels like a brittle shell that could shatter with a single misstep. Jessica catches herself overthinking every word, every glance exchanged with William, terrified that someone might notice. Matt, her son, is particularly perceptive. Though only 17, he's mature for his age, sharp, and increasingly suspicious of his mother's strange behavior. At first, the changes are subtle. Jessica avoids eye contact with Matt when William is around. She grows distant with Peter, retreating from even the brief intimacy they used to share. She starts staying up late at night, lost in thought, tormented by the conflict between the life she has and the illicit desire she can't seem to resist. Peter, too wrapped up in his work, doesn't notice the growing chasm between them, but Matt does. It starts with small moments, Matt catching his mother looking at William in a way that makes him uncomfortable, or William making excuses to spend more time around Jessica. The tension is palpable, a current running just beneath the surface of the household. Matt feels it, even if he can't yet put it into words. It makes him wary, and that wariness quickly turns into suspicion. One day, after dinner, Matt lingers in the kitchen, watching as Jessica and William clean up. He notices the way William's hand lingers on her shoulder for just a moment too long. His stomach tightens. He knows something is off, but the thought of it, the mere idea that his mother and half-brother could be involved in something so twisted, seems impossible to fully comprehend. He pushes the thought away, but it nags at him relentlessly. Jessica is hyper-aware of Matt's watchful eyes, and it only adds to her growing sense of paranoia. Every glance he throws her way feels like an accusation. Every quiet moment alone with William feels like they're on the verge of being discovered. The secret, once thrilling, is now a burden she can hardly carry. One evening, as Jessica and William share a fleeting, stolen moment in the living room while Peter is away again, Matt walks in. His presence is unexpected, and the atmosphere between Jessica and William shifts abruptly. Jessica freezes, her heart pounding in her chest. William steps back quickly, but it's too late. The look in Matt's eyes tells her that he's seen too much. Matt doesn't say anything right away, but Jessica can see the turmoil in his eyes. He stares at them for a long, agonizing moment before turning and walking out of the room. Jessica's heart races as she watches him leave. She knows deep down that the moment has come. Their secret is on the brink of being exposed. Later that night, after everyone has gone to bed, Matt confronts his mother. He corners her in the kitchen, his face a mixture of anger, confusion, and betrayal. His voice is low, but the intensity behind his words is unmistakable. "Mom, what's going on between you and William?" Jessica's stomach drops. She has rehearsed this conversation 100 times in her head, imagining all the ways she could lie her way out of it. But now that the moment is here, all those plans crumble. She can't look her son in the eye, and her silence only fuels his anger. "Don't lie to me," Matt says, his voice trembling. "I've seen the way you look at him. I'm not stupid." Jessica tries to deflect, to claim that Matt is overreacting. But the words sound hollow even to her. She feels like she's sinking, the weight of her guilt dragging her down. She's never seen Matt like this. His hands are shaking, his face pale with emotion. He demands the truth, and finally, with tears in her eyes, Jessica breaks. "I'm so sorry, Matt," she whispers. "I never meant for any of this to happen." The moment she admits it, Matt's world comes crashing down. He feels like everything he's ever known, his family, his home, his entire life, has been a lie. He's overwhelmed with a sense of betrayal so deep that he can hardly breathe. The mother he trusted, the brother he admired, have both shattered his sense of security. The rage bubbling beneath the surface finally erupts. "How could you do this? How could you ruin everything?" he yells, his voice shaking with anger. Jessica tries to reach out to him, but Matt pulls away, disgusted. His emotions are a whirlwind: anger, hurt, confusion. But most of all, he feels betrayed. He storms out of the house, leaving Jessica standing alone in the kitchen, her heart breaking. The confrontation with his mother leaves Matt in turmoil, his emotions spiraling out of control. He wanders the streets, trying to process everything, but the pain is too much. He feels sick, betrayed not just by his mother, but by the world that once felt so safe and predictable. When he returns home late that night, his mind is racing. He doesn't go to his room. Instead, he finds himself in the living room, pacing back and forth. His thoughts are consumed by images of his mother and William together, the betrayal cutting deeper with each passing moment. William enters the room, oblivious to Matt's emotional state. He tries to speak to Matt, to calm him down, but the sight of William, the man who has caused so much destruction in his life, only fuels Matt's anger. Before he even realizes what he's doing, Matt confronts William, his voice filled with rage. "You ruined everything," Matt says, his fists clenched at his sides. "How could you do this to us?" William, startled by the intensity of Matt's anger, tries to defuse the situation. "Matt, listen. I never meant for any of this to happen. It's complicated, but Matt is beyond reason." The pain and betrayal boil over, and in a blind moment of rage, he lunges at William. The fight is brief, but violent. Matt shoves William, and William stumbles backward, hitting his head on the corner of the coffee table with a sickening thud. For a moment, everything is still. Matt stands frozen, his chest heaving, the adrenaline pumping through his veins. But when he sees William lying motionless on the floor, panic sets in. He rushes to his brother's side, shaking him, calling his name, but there's no response. The realization hits him like a freight train. William is dead. Jessica, hearing the commotion, rushes into the room. The sight of her son kneeling over William's lifeless body is enough to make her heart stop. She screams, but the sound feels distant, like it's coming from someone else. Time seems to slow down as she falls to her knees beside Matt, the weight of what's just happened crashing down on them both. The shock of William's death leaves both Jessica and Matt paralyzed with fear. They know the consequences of what has just happened are too immense to face. If the truth comes out, Matt will be charged with manslaughter, their family will be destroyed, and Jessica will be exposed for the affair that led to this tragedy. The weight of their guilt presses down on them, like an unbearable burden. Jessica, still in shock, pulls Matt to his feet. They need to act and fast. She knows there's no coming back from this, but she also knows they can't afford to let the truth be known. They make a plan, a desperate, horrible plan, to cover up William's death. They clean up the scene, moving William's body to his car. Jessica drives in a daze, with Matt beside her, as they concoct a false narrative. William left in the middle of the night to return to Los Angeles, angry after an argument. They dump his car and his body off the side of a remote road, hoping that by the time anyone finds him, it will look like an accident or a robbery gone wrong. Back home, the house is eerily silent. Jessica and Matt can barely look at each other, the weight of what they've done pressing down on them with every passing moment. They live in constant fear of being discovered, their every movement carefully calculated to avoid suspicion. But the secret is unbearable, gnawing away at them day by day. As days turn into weeks, the Palmer household is a shadow of what it once was. Jessica is consumed by grief and guilt, her once perfect life, now a prison of her own making. She avoids her friends, her neighbors, even Peter. She can barely look him in the eye, knowing that the lie they're living is teetering on the edge of exposure. Matt, too, is spiraling. The guilt over William's death eats away at him, and he begins to withdraw from everyone around him. He stops going to school, stops seeing his friends. The once promising future that lay before him now feels meaningless. Matt, once a vibrant and driven teenager, now wanders through life in a state of perpetual numbness. The guilt festers inside him like a wound that won't heal. The boy who was once full of promise, academically gifted, athletically talented, has crumbled under the weight of his secret. He stops attending practice, avoids his friends, and spends most of his time locked in his room. The sound of his mother's footsteps in the hallway sends waves of guilt through him, but he can't bring himself to talk to her. Every time he looks at her, he is reminded of that terrible night. Jessica is barely holding herself together. She goes through the motions of everyday life, cooking meals, attending parent-teacher meetings, organizing charity events, but she feels like a ghost in her own life. Her world has become a performance. Each interaction with Peter, Matt, or her friends another scene in the elaborate lie she's been forced to live. Every time Peter mentions William, her heart races with fear. She knows he's becoming suspicious. William hasn't been in contact for weeks, and Peter's once casual inquiries about his son's whereabouts have taken on a more insistent tone. "What's going on, Jess?" Peter asks one evening, as they sit together on the patio, the warm glow of the setting sun casting shadows across their faces. "Why haven't we heard from William? I've called him, I've texted him, but it's like he's disappeared." Jessica forces a smile, her heart pounding in her chest. "You know how he is," she says, her voice strained but steady. "He probably just needed some space. He's been under a lot of pressure lately." Peter doesn't seem convinced. His eyes linger on her, searching for something he can't quite articulate. Jessica looks away, unable to meet his gaze for too long. The fear of him discovering the truth is a constant presence in her mind, gnawing at her like a disease. As the weeks drag on, Peter's suspicions grow. He begins to ask more pointed questions about William, questions that Jessica struggles to answer without betraying herself. The tension between them becomes unbearable. Their once solid marriage, now cracking under the strain of the secrets Jessica keeps hidden. But it's Matt who begins to unravel the most. The guilt over William's death becomes too much for him to bear. He starts to lash out at Jessica, at himself, at the world around him. He begins drinking, staying out late, and getting into trouble. The once promising future he had worked so hard for is slipping away, and he doesn't seem to care. One night, after a particularly heated argument with Jessica, Matt storms out of the house. He drives recklessly through the streets, his mind racing with anger and guilt. He pulls over on a deserted stretch of road, the same road where they had left William's body. He sits there, staring into the darkness, the weight of his actions pressing down on him like a vice. He can't take it anymore. The secret is eating him alive, and he knows that if he doesn't confess, it will destroy him. He returns home, his hands shaking, his heart pounding in his chest. Jessica is waiting for him in the living room, her face pale and drawn. "Matt, we can't keep living like this," she says quietly, her voice trembling. "I don't know how much longer we can keep this up." Matt doesn't respond. He stands there, his fists clenched at his sides, his jaw tight. He can't look at her. He can't look at anyone. He feels like he's suffocating under the weight of the secret they've been hiding. "I can't do this anymore," he finally whispers, his voice barely audible. "I have to tell Dad." The confession comes late at night. Peter is in his study, working on a case, when Matt enters the room. His son looks disheveled, pale, and haunted. Nothing like the boy Peter once knew. Peter looks up from his desk, surprised to see Matt standing in the doorway, his face contorted with emotion. "Dad, I need to talk to you," Matt says, his voice cracking with tension. Peter sets down his pen, sensing that something is terribly wrong. He motions for Matt to sit, but Matt remains standing, his fists clenched at his sides. "What's going on?" Peter asks, his voice filled with concern. "What's happened?" For a moment, Matt can't find the words. His throat feels tight, his chest heavy with the weight of what he's about to confess. He glances at his father, the man who has always been his role model, his protector, and he knows that what he's about to say will destroy him. "It's about William," Matt finally says, his voice barely above a whisper. Peter's expression shifts from concern to confusion. "William? What do you mean?" Matt takes a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He feels like he's about to jump off a cliff, with no idea where he'll land. "He's dead, Dad," Matt says, his voice trembling. "William's dead." Peter stares at Matt, the words not quite sinking in. "What are you talking about?" he says, his voice laced with disbelief. "That's impossible. William, he's not." Matt interrupts him, his voice breaking. "I killed him, Dad. It was an accident, but he's dead. I didn't mean to. I lost control. And Mom helped me cover it up." Peter's world shatters in that moment. The words hit him like a physical blow, knocking the breath out of him. His mind races, trying to make sense of what he's just heard, but it feels like the ground has been ripped out from under him. He stands up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. What did you just say?" he asks, his voice shaking. "You killed him?" "Jessica covered it up." Matt nods, tears streaming down his face. "It was an accident, Dad. I swear. We didn't know what to do. We were scared. We didn't want you to find out." Peter is shaking, his hands trembling as he stares at his son, the boy he thought he knew, the boy he raised. His mind is reeling, his heart pounding in his chest. He feels sick, dizzy, as the reality of the situation crashes down on him. "No," Peter says, his voice barely a whisper. "No! This can't be happening." But it is. The truth is out, and there's no taking it back. Peter stumbles out of the room, his heart racing, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. He can't process what he's just heard. He stumbles into the living room, where Jessica is sitting, her face pale and tear-streaked. She looks up at him, her eyes filled with guilt and fear. "Peter," she whispers, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry." But Peter can't hear her. His world has collapsed. The woman he trusted, the family he thought he had, the life he believed was real, it's all been a lie. He stares at Jessica, his heart breaking, unable to comprehend how they've come to this point. "How could you?" he asks, his voice filled with anguish. "How could you lie to me? How could you let this happen?" Jessica sobs, her guilt overwhelming her. "I didn't know what to do, Peter. I didn't know how to fix it. But there's no fixing it. The damage has been done. William is dead, Matt is broken, and their family is shattered beyond repair." In the weeks that follow, the Palmer family is torn apart. The police are called, and Matt turns himself in, confessing to William's accidental death. The media descends on the family, turning their tragedy into a spectacle. Peter files for divorce, unable to forgive Jessica for her betrayal and the role she played in covering up William's death. Matt is charged with involuntary manslaughter, though the court is sympathetic to the fact that it was an accident. The cover-up weighs heavily against him. He is sentenced to a few years in a juvenile detention center, his once bright future now in ruins. Jessica is left alone in the empty house, haunted by the choices she made and the family she destroyed. She avoids the outside world, unable to face the judgment of her neighbors, her friends, and most of all, herself. Every room in the house is a reminder of the life she once had, a life that is now irreparably broken. Peter, devastated by the loss of his son and the betrayal of his wife, retreats into his work, trying to bury the pain. But no amount of legal victories can fill the void left by William's death. The perfect suburban life that once defined the Palmer family is gone, replaced by a tragedy that will forever haunt them. And as Jessica sits alone in the house, she realizes that the emptiness she once felt has been replaced by something far worse: regret. A regret so deep that it will follow her for the rest of her life. The suburbs, once a place of safety and perfection, have become a prison. And no matter how hard Jessica tries, there is no escape from the consequences of the choices she made. The story concludes with the deep emotional scars left on the Palmer family, a cautionary tale of how secrets, guilt, and betrayal can destroy even the most perfect of lives.